The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel was filled with executives in impeccable attire, champagne flowing freely, and the constant murmur of conversations about business and multi-million-dollar deals. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden light over the elegantly decorated tables, while waiters circulated with trays of sophisticated canapes. It was Continental Holdings Gala Night, celebrating the biggest deal in the company's history, an $800 million merger that would transform the American corporate landscape. Marcus Webb sat discreetly at one of the back tables, observing everything with a slight smile. His suit was well-tailored but not ostentatious, his shoes polished but not flashy. He had learned long ago that true wealth doesn't need to shout to be heard. At 42, Marcus had built an empire from scratch, but few in that room knew who he really was. He preferred it that way. He always preferred it that way. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" A female voice sounded beside him. Marcus looked up and saw a blonde woman in an emerald green dress. A forced smile stretched across her perfectly made-up face. "No, you can sit down," Marcus replied politely. The woman, whose name tag identified her as Jennifer Ashton, Vice President of Corporate Development, sat down with a dramatic sigh. What a boring event. 3 hours of pompous speeches about an agreement I don't even fully understand. Marcus simply nodded, taking a sip of his sparkling water. He rarely drank alcohol at public events. He liked to keep a clear mind. "Do you work at Continental?" Jennifer asked, her eyes scanning Marcus's suit in an appraising way. "Not exactly," Marcus replied with calculated honesty. "Ah, so you must be from one of the subsidiary companies. Which division?" "It's complicated," Marcus said simply. He wasn't being evasive for fun, but he had learned that revealing who he was too early often artificially changed the dynamics of conversations. Jennifer rolled her eyes slightly. "Complicated, I understand. Well, whatever you do, I hope you're enjoying the free food. I heard this dinner cost over $200,000. Before Marcus could answer, a group of 3 men approached the table, all wearing suits clearly more expensive than Marcus's, watches that probably cost more than a luxury car gleaming on their wrists. "Jennifer, there you are!" The man in front, a tall gray-haired fellow named Richard Carmichael, Chief Financial Officer of Continental, exclaimed, "We were looking for you. We need to discuss the strategy for tomorrow's meeting with investors." "Of course, Richard." Jennifer stood up quickly, clearly more interested in talking to the senior executives than to Marcus. Richard looked at Marcus for the first time, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You are Marcus Webb." He extended his hand politely. Richard shook his hand weakly and disinterestedly. "Richard Carmichael, CFO. Which company are you from?" "I'm an investor," Marcus replied simply. "Investor," Richard repeated, a condescending tone creeping into his voice. "Interesting. Small investor or—" "It depends on your definition of small," Marcus said with a slight smile. The other 2 men laughed, clearly interpreting Marcus's comment as a self-deprecating joke. One of them, Jason Hendricks, Vice President of Operations, patted Marcus on the shoulder in a paternalistic manner. "We all start somewhere, my friend. Keep trying. Who knows, one day you might be sitting at the front tables with the big players." Marcus simply nodded, not bothering to correct the incorrect assumption. He had experienced this kind of condescension countless times throughout his career. Being a black man in predominantly white corporate environments, he was often underestimated, ignored, or treated as if he didn't belong. What these people didn't know was that Marcus Webb wasn't just an investor. He was the founder and principal shareholder of Webb Capital Partners, one of the most powerful and discreet private equity firms in the United States. His company controlled portfolios worth billions of dollars, and he had significant stakes in dozens of multinational corporations, including Continental Holdings. In fact, Marcus was the man behind the $800 million deal everyone was celebrating that night. His company had provided 60% of the capital needed for the merger, but he had deliberately kept his identity out of the public spotlight, preferring that his legal representatives and mid-level executives handle the visible negotiations. He had his reasons. Marcus had learned that remaining in the shadows gave him an advantage. He could observe people's true character before they revealed their professional masks. He could see how they treated those they considered inferior, how they acted when they thought no one important was watching, and often, what he saw was disappointing. "So, Marcus," Jennifer turned her attention to him again, but her tone had changed. becoming more casual and slightly condescending. What exactly do you invest in? Mutual funds? Individual stocks? A little bit of everything, Marcus replied vaguely. Richard let out a loud laugh. Ah, so you're one of those app investors, day trader, betting your savings on cryptocurrencies and meme stocks. The other executives laughed, and Marcus could see that some of them had drunk too much champagne. Their eyes were becoming glazed, their gestures more expansive and careless. Something like that, Marcus said calmly, deciding not to waste energy correcting them. Look, Jason leaned closer, his breath heavy with alcohol. I'll give you a free tip, since you seem like a nice guy. Get out of these small-time bets. If you really want to make real money, you need to be where the big deals happen, like the one we closed today, $800 million. Now that's real money. Impressive, Marcus agreed. And who provided the capital for this deal? Richard waved his hand dismissively. Ah, some obscure private equity firm. No, I don't remember the exact name. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we made the deal happen. The strategic vision, the execution, all of that came from our executive leadership. Marcus had to admit, there was something almost comical about the situation. These men were literally bragging to the man who had made their deal possible, without having the slightest idea who he was. Webb Capital Partners, Marcus offered calmly. Yes, that's the name. Richard snapped his fingers. Do you know them? I could say yes. Well, they're lucky to have been able to participate in our deal, Jason declared arrogantly. We guarantee they'll triple their investment over the next 5 years. Marcus smiled inwardly. The arrogance of these executives was remarkable. The truth was that Webb Capital Partners had conducted an extremely rigorous due diligence before agreeing to finance the merger. Their team had identified at least a dozen significant inefficiencies in Continental's operations that needed to be corrected. The deal had only been approved because Marcus saw the long-term potential, not because of the brilliant leadership of these executives. In fact, part of the agreement included clauses that would allow Webb Capital Partners to assume operational control if certain performance targets were not met. But clearly, these details had not been widely shared with Continental's executive team. I hope you achieve these goals, Marcus said diplomatically. Without a doubt, Richard replied with overconfidence. We have the best executive team in the industry. Our strategy is foolproof. At that moment, a woman in a red dress joined the group. It was Victoria Langford, CEO of Continental Holdings. She was known for her aggressive leadership and her reputation for being ruthless in business. Richard, Jason, she greeted the men with air kisses on each cheek. Her eyes passed over Marcus briefly, without real recognition or interest. Are you enjoying the celebration? Absolutely, Victoria, Richard replied. We were just educating our new friend here about the details of the agreement. Victoria finally looked at Marcus more directly. And you are? Marcus Webb. He extended his hand. Victoria shook her hand with a firm but brief grip. Nice to meet you. What's your area of expertise? Investments. Ah, Victoria immediately lost interest, her gaze already searching for more important faces in the crowd. That's good. Well, enjoy the party. And just as she came, she went, gravitating toward a group of institutional investors and local politicians on the other side of the room. Marcus observed the interaction with his usual anthropological curiosity. He had seen this pattern countless times. Corporate executives assessing a person's worth in microseconds, based on superficial appearances, titles, and perceived connections. Dinner was served, and Marcus found himself effectively excluded from the conversations at his table. The other occupants were far more interested in impressing each other, sharing stories of professional achievements, luxury properties, and connections to powerful people. Marcus ate his salmon silently, occasionally checking his phone. He had 3 messages from Amanda Chen, his COO at Webb Capital Partners. Everything all right there? Are the Continental executives being polite? Marcus smiled and typed a reply. Let's just say it's been enlightening. Do I need to intervene? Amanda asked. She was fiercely protective and had little patience for disrespect. No, let it play out. It'll be a good story later. As the night wore on, alcohol consumption increased, and with it, the executive's behavior became more relaxed and less filtered. Richard Carmichael, in particular, was clearly drunk, his tie loosened, his face flushed. Do you know what the problem is with investors these days? Richard announced loudly enough for half the table to hear. They think they deserve credit just for putting money in, but money is cheap. The real skill lies in execution. Our execution. Jason raised his glass in drunken agreement. Exactly. Anyone can write a check, but it takes real talent to build something. Marcus could have pointed out that building a financial empire from scratch, as he had done, required substantially more than simply writing checks, but he remained silent, observing. That's when Jennifer Ashton, also visibly intoxicated, decided to share her opinion. You know what I hate? People who show up at these events pretending to be something they're not. Like those small investors who buy a cheap suit and try to blend in with the big players. She looked directly at Marcus when she said that. The atmosphere at the table shifted slightly. Some of the other guests seemed uncomfortable, but no one said anything. It was as if an invisible line had been crossed, but no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge it. Marcus maintained his neutral expression. That's an interesting point of view. It's not a point of view, it's a fact, Jennifer continued, her filter clearly compromised by the alcohol. I mean, no offense, but you clearly don't belong here. This event is for real corporate players, not for, well, you understand. Jennifer, Richard tried to interject weakly, but he was laughing as he did so, suggesting that he didn't really disapprove. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Jennifer insisted. Look at him. Suit off the rack, no jewelry, probably drove a second-hand car to get here. I bet he got an invitation from some acquaintance and is only here for the free food and drinks. The silence at the table was now palpable. Even through her drunkenness, some of the executives sensed that Jennifer had gone too far, but the toxic mix of alcohol, privilege, and corporate arrogance had created a moment where social masks had completely fallen. Marcus remained calm. He had experienced racism, classism, and contempt in far more hostile forms throughout his life. This was almost trivial in comparison. But it was also instructive, revealing. You might be right, Marcus said softly. Maybe I don't belong here. Jennifer smiled, interpreting his response as a concession. At least you're honest about it. I respect that. That's when it happened. Victoria Langford was walking past the table. Again, a glass of red wine in her hand, laughing at something someone had said. She wasn't paying attention to where she was going. Her eyes focused on the group of senior executives in front of her, and she tripped. It wasn't a big stumble. Just a clumsy step in her high heels, but it was enough to make the glass in her hand wobble violently. The red wine spilled from the glass in a graceful and dramatic arc, directly over Marcus's head. The dark red liquid spilled over his hair, ran down his face, stained his suit. The entire room seemed to freeze for a moment, hundreds of pairs of eyes turning to witness the scene. And then, instead of an apology, Victoria Langford did something extraordinary. She started laughing. Oh my God, she said between laughs, without making any move to help or apologize. This is hilarious. Sorry, but you look ridiculous now. And then, as if a signal had been given, others at the table began to laugh as well. Jennifer was laughing so hard that tears were streaming down her face. Richard and Jason were doubled over with laughter. Even other guests at nearby tables were smiling, pointing, and murmuring amongst themselves. Marcus Webb, covered in expensive wine, simply sat there. He didn't jump up in panic. He didn't shout or curse. He simply picked up a napkin and calmly began to dry his face. This is so perfect, Jennifer managed to say between laughs. The wannabe small investor finally looks like what he really is, a soaked beggar. The public humiliation was complete. Smartphone cameras were being raised, capturing the moment. Marcus could see flashes of light. He knew this image would be on social media and in corporate gossip group messages before the night was over. The Continental Director of Operations stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please turn your attention to the front. We have some special announcements to make. Gradually, the crowd's attention shifted away from Marcus, though muffled laughter could still be heard echoing through the room. Victoria finally offered a superficial apology. Sorry about that, before walking toward the stage, clearly more concerned with her appearance in front of the crowd than with any harm she might have caused. Marcus continued drying himself methodically. A waiter approached with additional towels and an expression of genuine sympathy. Sir, may I bring you something? Sparkling water might help with the stain. I'm fine. Thank you, Marcus said calmly. The waiter, a Hispanic man of about 50, met his eyes, and Marcus saw something there. Recognition from someone who had probably experienced his own share of disrespect from wealthy and powerful clients. On stage, Victoria Langford had taken the microphone. Good evening, everyone. What an incredible night it has been. We are here to celebrate not just an agreement, but a complete transformation of Continental Holdings. Applause filled the hall. This $800 million deal would not have been possible without the tireless dedication of our executive team, Victoria continued, pointing to Richard, Jason, and others. Their vision, their determination, their strategic brilliance is what brought us here tonight. More applause. The appointed executives nodded graciously, absorbing the recognition. Marcus remained seated in silence, still soaked in wine, watching the whole spectacle unfold. There was a profound irony in it all, a theater of the absurd, that he could almost appreciate if he weren't literally drenched in $200 Cabernet Sauvignon. And now, Victoria announced with a dramatic flourish, I have the pleasure of introducing a very special guest, someone who rarely makes public appearances, but who has agreed to join us tonight. He represents the investment firm that provided the crucial capital to make our dreams a reality. Marcus felt his phone vibrate. It was Amanda Chen again. It's now. Do you want me to come pick you up? Marcus typed a reply. No need. I can walk to the stage by myself. Victoria continued, unaware of the drama about to unfold. It is my great pleasure to introduce the representative of Webb Capital Partners, the firm that believed in our vision and provided 60% of the funding for this historic deal. Please welcome them. She paused, looking at her notepad. Then her smile froze. Her eyes widened. The notepad trembled in her hand. Please welcome Marcus Webb, founder and CEO of Webb Capital Partners. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if every person in the room had forgotten how to breathe simultaneously. Marcus stood calmly, his suit still stained with wine, and began to walk toward the stage. His footsteps echoed in the deathly silence. All eyes were on him now, but not with mockery, with growing horror, disbelief, and on some faces, pure terror. Jennifer Ashton had turned completely pale, her hand covering her mouth. Richard Carmichael looked like he was having a heart attack, his face turning from flushed to gray. Jason Hendricks was simply frozen, his champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. Marcus climbed the stage steps with measured movements. Victoria Langford was literally trembling, the microphone almost falling from her hand. She had just spilled wine on the man who had the power to destroy her company, her career, everything. Marcus gently took the microphone from her. For a long moment, he simply stood there, looking at the crowd, letting the silence stretch out, letting the full weight of realization sink into each person who had laughed at him, belittled him, humiliated him. Good evening, he finally said, his voice calm and composed. I apologize for my appearance. I had a little accident with wine. A few nervous and embarrassed laughs echoed through the room, but mostly stunned silence. My name is Marcus Webb, and yes, I am the founder and CEO of Webb Capital Partners. Our firm provided $480 million of the $800 million that made this merger possible. He paused, letting that number sink in. I was invited to this event tonight, but I chose to arrive quietly, sit in the back, and simply observe. You see, I've learned over the years that you learn much more about an organization by observing how people behave when they think no one important is watching. The discomfort in the room was palpable now. Tonight I was called a small investor, a wannabe, a beggar. I was told that I don't belong here, that my suit was cheap, that I probably drove a second-hand car. Marcus could see Jennifer sinking into her chair, wishing she could disappear. And you know what? Part of that is correct. I drove a used car, a 2015 Toyota Camry to be exact. It has 300,000 kilometers on it, but it still runs perfectly. Why should I buy a new one when this one still works? Some people in the crowd laughed nervously, unsure if it was appropriate. As for my suit, Marcus continued, you're right, it's not custom made. I bought it at Brooks Brothers. It cost $800. You know why? Because I grew up poor. My mother raised 3 children on a nurse's salary. She taught me that unnecessary ostentation is a sign of insecurity, not success. The room was completely silent now. Marcus could see that his words were hitting their mark, not only with those who had insulted him, but with many others in the audience who recognized their own tendencies toward superficial judgment. I built Webb Capital Partners from scratch. I started with $10,000 I saved working 3 jobs during college. Today, we manage $23 billion in assets. We have stakes in 147 companies worldwide. He left those numbers hanging in the air. But here's what worries me about tonight. It's not that I was disrespected, although that certainly happened. It's what that disrespect reveals about the culture of this organization. Victoria Langford looked like she was about to faint. During my hours tonight before this revelation, I heard executives claim credit for the work of others. I saw leadership belittle the small investors who actually make the economy work. I witnessed public humiliation treated as entertainment. And most disturbingly, I observed how you treat people you deem to be below you in status. Marcus paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. The true measure of character is not how you treat your superiors. It's how you treat those you believe can do nothing for you. How you treat the waiter, the valet, the security guard, the small investor at the back table you think doesn't matter. He could see people avoiding his gaze now, guilt and shame painted on their faces. "So, here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his tone becoming more businesslike. Webb Capital Partners will initiate a comprehensive review of Continental Holdings' operations. This review will examine not only financial efficiency and strategic performance, but also organizational culture, leadership practices, and corporate values. Victoria stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mr. Webb, please, we never intended—" Marcus cut her off gently but firmly. "Mrs. Langford, you spilled wine on me and then laughed. You offered no help, expressed no genuine remorse. You simply laughed and walked away. That's not a lapse in judgment. It's a revelation of character." He turned back to the crowd. "As part of our audit, we will be conducting confidential interviews with employees at all levels. We want to understand if the behavior I witnessed tonight is an anomaly or a pattern." Richard Carmichael stood up, staggering slightly. "Mr. Webb, with all due respect, we were celebrating. People drank a little too much. Surely you can understand." "I can understand," Marcus agreed. "I can understand that alcohol lowers inhibitions. But it doesn't build character. It only reveals what was already there." He let that statement hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "Now, I know many of you are worried about your jobs right now. Let me be clear. Webb Capital Partners is not in the business of unnecessarily destroying careers, but we are also not in the business of allowing toxic behavior to harm our investments." Marcus looked directly at Jennifer Ashton. "Ms. Ashton, your technical skills are impressive. I read your work on supply chain optimization. It's brilliant. But technical skills without emotional intelligence and basic human respect are incomplete. You will have the opportunity to demonstrate growth, but you will be closely watched." Jennifer nodded in agreement, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "Mr. Carmichael," Marcus continued, "you have 42 years of financial experience, but that experience is compromised when you allow arrogance to replace humility. A true leader lifts others up, not diminishes them to feel superior." Richard couldn't even look up. "And Ms. Langford," Marcus finally turned to the CEO, "you've built an impressive career, but leadership requires more than strategic acumen. It requires empathy, accountability, and the recognition that your behavior sets the tone for the entire organization." Victoria was crying openly now, all her executive composure crumbling. Marcus softened his tone. "But here's the thing about investing. Whether in companies or people, you invest in potential, not just past performance. And I believe in the potential for change." He could feel the room collectively breathing a cautious sigh of relief. "So, here's my proposal. Over the next 90 days, Webb Capital Partners will work with Continental's leadership to implement comprehensive cultural changes. This will include mandatory diversity and inclusion training, emotional intelligence workshops, and anonymous review processes where employees at all levels can provide feedback on leadership without fear of retaliation." Marcus paused. "And here's the important part. If at the end of these 90 days we don't see any significant improvement, Webb Capital Partners will exercise its contractual options to make personnel changes at the executive level." The threat was clear: reform or be replaced. But I truly believe that everyone in this room is capable of better. Tonight was uncomfortable, even humiliating for some. But discomfort is where growth happens. Marcus looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting the event to Continental's remote offices. "To all Continental employees watching, you deserve to work in an environment where you are respected, regardless of your title, background, or position. You deserve leadership that elevates you, and we will work together to create that." He handed the microphone back to Victoria, who caught it with trembling hands. "Now, if you'll excuse me," Marcus said, with a slight smile. I need to go change my clothes. Red wine really is hard to get out. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then someone began to applaud. Slowly, hesitantly, others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was giving a standing ovation, though much of the applause came from mid-level and junior employees who had finally seen someone champion the kind of respectful leadership they had long desired. Marcus stepped down from the stage and began walking towards the exit. As he passed his original table, the waiter who had offered him towels earlier approached him. "Mr. Webb," he said calmly, "it was an honor to serve you tonight." Marcus shook his hand warmly. "What's your name?" "Roberto, sir." "Roberto, how long have you worked at this hotel?" 23 years, sir." "And do they treat you well?" Roberto hesitated, then gave a small smile. "Better than some of the guests we've served, sir." Marcus handed him a business card. "If you've ever considered a career change, Webb Capital Partners always looks for people with a strong work ethic and integrity. Send me an email." Roberto's eyes widened. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much." As Marcus walked toward the exit of the hall, he was stopped by several people. Some wanted to apologize. Others expressed support for what he had said. Still others simply wanted to shake the hand of the man who had just given the entire corporate establishment a lesson in humility. Outside the hotel, Amanda Chen was waiting with Marcus's Camry. She glanced at his wine-stained suit and shook her head. "Let me guess, it wasn't a quiet night?" "You could say that." Marcus smiled, getting into the car. "You were very kind in there," Amanda said as she drove. "I would have been much harsher." "Kindness is not weakness, Amanda, and cruelty builds nothing lasting." "True, but it's satisfactory." Marcus laughed. "Maybe, but I prefer to build than to destroy. These people made mistakes, some terrible ones, but they deserve the chance to learn from them. Do you think they're really going to change? Some will go, others won't. And those who don't change will discover that the world isn't as tolerant as I am." They drove in silence for a few minutes before Amanda spoke again. "You know this is going to be everywhere tomorrow, right? Secret billionaire publicly humiliated before revealing identity. Social media is going to explode." "Leave it," Marcus said calmly. "Perhaps it will be a good lesson for others as well. Treat everyone with respect. You never know who's sitting at the back table." The following morning, the story had indeed exploded. Videos of Marcus's revelation were viral across all platforms. Business commentators were debating the implications. Opinion pieces on corporate culture, class, and judgment were being published in all major media outlets. But what caught Marcus's attention the most was an email he received from Victoria Langford at 7 a.m. "Senior Webb, there are not enough words to express my shame and regret for what happened last night. You were absolutely right. My behavior was unforgivable, and more importantly, it revealed fundamental flaws in my leadership and character that I will spend each day working to correct. I am committed to the 90 days of cultural transformation you proposed. More than that, I am committed to becoming the kind of leader my employees deserve. Thank you for giving me, and all of us, the chance to do better." With profound humility, Victoria Langford Marcus read the email twice. It seemed sincere. Only time would tell if that sincerity would translate into real change. He typed a reply. "Mrs. Langford, I appreciate your response. I'll see you on Monday to begin this work together. W." 90 days later, the transformation at Continental Holdings was remarkable. The company had implemented comprehensive diversity and inclusion policies, created anonymous feedback channels that were genuinely taken seriously, and completely revamped its leadership culture. Victoria Langford had become a vocal advocate for humble leadership, frequently sharing the story of her own failure as a lesson on the importance of treating everyone with respect. Richard Carmichael had enrolled in an executive coaching program. Jennifer Ashton had started a mentoring program for young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. Not everyone had made the change. Jason Hendricks had chosen to leave. The company, unable or unwilling to adapt to the new standards. Some other mid-level executives had also left, but those who remained were genuinely transformed. And Roberto, the waiter, he had sent that email to Marcus and was now working in the operations department at Webb Capital Partners, his work ethic and attention to detail making him a valuable asset. Marcus Webb sat in his office, gazing out the window at the city skyline. His phone rang. It was an invitation to another corporate gala event. He smiled to himself. Maybe he would accept, and maybe, just maybe, he would sit at the back table again. Because sometimes, The best lessons are learned when people don't know they're being tested. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one no one notices until it's too late.